Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. 6 more Palestinians died of starvation and malnutrition in Gaza, raising the toll to 175, including 93 children. The humanitarian crisis deepens as Egypt prepares to deliver fuel to the enclave, while Israeli fire kills more than 40 people, some trying to reach aid hubs. The Palestine Red Crescent Society accused Israeli forces of attacking its headquarters in Gaza, killing 1 worker and injuring 3 others. The organisation described the early Sunday attack in Khan Yunis as deliberate, with the facility clearly marked for the Israeli military. 5 members of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces were killed in an Islamic State attack on a checkpoint in Deir el-Zor in eastern Syria. The SDF had been a key US allied force in defeating the Islamic State in 2019. Gunmen kidnapped more than 50 people in a mass abduction in Sabon Garin Damri in Nigeria on Friday. The attack is the latest in a region struggling with gangs that kidnap for ransom, loot villages and demand taxes. A Russian missile strike on Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine injured at least 7 people and damaged dozens of homes and civilian infrastructure. 2 of the injured were hospitalized after the late Saturday attack, according to the regional governor. Iran's military commander-in-chief stated that threats from Israel remain, stressing the importance of taking every threat seriously. This comes after the Israel-US strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in June and Iran's retaliatory missile and drone attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed profound shock over videos showing 2 emaciated hostages in Gaza. The EU also condemned the clips and called for the immediate release of all remaining hostages. Russia's Ministry for Emergency Services lifted a tsunami warning for a Kamchatka Peninsula earthquake after a 7.0 magnitude quake hit the Kuril Islands. Although the waves were expected to be low, people were advised to move away from the shore. Now this hour we start in the Middle East, where in Syria's southern Sweida province, fresh violence has broken out. State-run Ekbaria TV reports that armed groups attacked members of the country's internal security forces, killing 1 and wounding others. Now the death toll has risen to 2. Shells were also fired at multiple villages, violating a recently agreed ceasefire in the mostly Druze region. The clashes first flared on July the 13th between Druze factions and tribal groups over long-standing tensions. Despite a US-brokered truce, violence continues to escalate. We're now joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, who's the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. He joins us live from New Delhi. Professor Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. There was obviously a huge escalation in violence in southern Syria, Sweida province in particular, where we saw the deaths of hundreds of people, both Druze, Bedouin and others. The US then brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Syria, which has led to a fragile truce being held ever since. What is your analysis of the region and how fragile is this truce between Druze and other groups in this southern region of Syria?
Look, I personally feel it's a very fragile truce, and if we can call it that, for a simple reason that the regime in power in Damascus is essentially a regime largely composed of former terrorists. I mean, al-Jilani, now called al-Shara, he's had a shave, he's had a haircut, he wears suits, but that doesn't change the fact that if you look him up under his real name, al-Jilani, you'll find a chain of terror attacks. So the reality of the situation is that to the Wahhabis and frankly al-Jilani, belongs to one of the extreme factions of what is itself a fringe, the Wahhabi fringe. Uh, well, the Alawites, the religious group to which Bashar Assad belongs to, are apostates, according to according to the Wahhabis. They're apostates. They're not even Muslim. And if you look at it from that point of view, the Druze and others, anybody who has a different method of worship than what they regard as correct, which is a very, very narrow band of worship, frankly, not representative of the great religion of Islam, but that they regard them as apostates. So given that situation, I mean, I would disbelieve that the Syrian forces suffered the casualties. I think the casualties are much more on the other side, and I don't believe the carnage in Syria has stopped at all. We have stopped reporting on it. On the assumption the ceasefire is holding, the world's media have turned their attention away from Syria, but the reality is, my information is, every day killings are going on, mainly of those who are not Wahhabis, and it's going on for loyal to the government led by al-Jolani.
Okay. Professor Nalaput, what do you think about the future of Syria? Obviously, we've seen them trying to kind of become closer with the West. We've seen Donald Trump lift sanctions on them. And however, as you have mentioned, that there has been violence, especially in the last few weeks. What do you think the future of Syria holds?
Look, you ask the Israelis, they will tell you exactly what sort of a government is in power in Syria, what sort of groups are in power in Syria. And very frankly, they're coming from a Wahhabi sect, which is different from the sect to which terror groups affiliated with Iran belong to. But the fact is that they are very much part of a terror network, and that they have therefore been subject of relentless strikes by IDF forces, Israeli forces. So very, very honestly, I don't see any let up in that situation. And as for the future of Syria, well, I hope that the Syrian country is once again unified, but it can only be under a government composed of all the different groups, and a government composed of a group that abjures violence. Violence and the pursuit of violence, the perpetration of violence, and the running of a smooth democracy, well, they do not go together. Thank you.
Professor Nalaput, how important is Syria as a region for the stability of the Middle East, especially in recent times?
Look, I'd like to say that the Middle East is a region where you've got, for example, the GCC countries who are completely moderate and who have absolutely a very high level of tolerance, and who basically are completely abhorrent. For them, terror is abhorrent. But you have also these kind of fringe elements running countries such as Syria, which are totally different. And in my personal view, the future of the Arab people, I know the Arab people, they're a very courteous, very friendly people, overall a wonderful people. I visited Arab countries several times. I've always been treated very, very hospitably and very respectfully, despite there being differences of views on faiths. So I'd like to say that should be the future of Syria. As of now, I don't see it happening, but should be the future of Syria, a tolerant, moderate democracy.
Yes, thank you very much, Madhav Nadapat, for joining us here on the programme. We now stay in the region and move to the Gaza crisis, where at least 23 Palestinians were killed on Sunday as Israeli forces opened fire near food aid sites in Gaza, according to hospital officials and witnesses. The victims were reportedly trying to reach aid distribution points amid widespread famine and desperation in the territory. Witnesses described chaotic scenes of indiscriminate gunfire as crowds surged towards humanitarian convoys. Many victims were shot while carrying food or walking with family members. In Khan Yunis, a UN-run school sheltering displaced Palestinians was struck by Israeli fire. Survivors spoke of children killed in their sleep and the daily struggle for food and clean water. Let's listen in to what survivors had to say.
عجبت تعبنا كثير مش شوي. كل حياتنا صارت هيك، فيش مستقبلات، فيش مستقبل، فيش أحلام، فيش ولا إشي. ما خلوش للأطفال ولا حلم ولا مستقبل.
سطحين، فيش أكل ولا حاجة يعني عدم حياتنا عدم، يعني نموت لسه أرحم لنا من هذه الحياة. الموت أرحم لنا، إحنا والميتين بالسوا.
The humanitarian toll continues to grow, with multiple funerals held as grieving families demand international help. We're now joined by Ali Mohammed Bushback. He's a Middle East researcher joining us live from Cairo. Ali, thank you very much for joining us. Can you give us a quick snapshot of the past 24 hours or recent events in the Gaza Strip as you can in regards to the humanitarian situation that's going on the ground? We've heard more reports of people being killed while trying to collect aid today as well. What more can you tell us?
Thank you, Thomas. The things is on the ground, the situation is really miserable. Since morning, around more than 70 civilians have been killed, and since past the 24 hour, 119 civilians have been killed during the night. Israel bombardment, it's focused on Khan Yunis and northern part of Gaza, in Jabalia and Beit Hanun, and several of parties in Gaza. But the most Israeli bombardment focused on Khan Yunis, the southern part of Gaza. Around more than 30 civilians have been killed during the collecting the humanitarian aid. While Israel, according to international human rights organization, confirmed around 36 of track have been into Gaza since morning, and all the international communities and the human rights organization consider it as insufficient for the Palestinian and to save the situation from the famine and the starvation in Gaza, especially Thomas, the distribution of this food, it's not just because the Palestinian or the starved people, they looted these tracks during heading to the road to distribute points in Gaza. Thomas' situation is completely miserable, while there is no food in market, and I asked several of civilians in Gaza. They said just the only available is tomato in market. There is no other veg on the ground. Especially we are talking about the people, they are suffering from malnutrition and suffering from the starvation. Furthermore, Joshua, the fighting also on the ground, Israel's also deliberately targeting the civilians, and we have witnessed the testimony of the American resumed from the what's called the human rights humanitarian Gaza function, HGF. It's according to testimony, Israeli troops deliberately targeting the civilians, unarmed civilians. Up to now, also there is a several of protests on Western country, and today we have seen several of footage from Sydney, from Australia. 100,000 civilians have protested to support Palestinians and to demanding Israel to stop the war in Gaza. More than 1,000 Israeli artists they are signing in paper to asking the Israeli government to stop the war in Gaza and accept the deal, a comprehensive deal in one time, to release the whole captive in one time, instead of rely on two faces or apartheid or several of parties to release the hostages on the ground.
Yes.
Also, we are talking about several hundred of civilians have been who got injured during the Israelis' open fire toward the civilians, have admitted to hospital, which make it the situation miserable, especially that the hospitals and the medical bodies in Gaza suffering from outrage and shortage of the supplies to treat the civilians who got injured. Joshua, there is also protest in Israel to demanding Israeli government to stop the war and reach to deal with Hamas. Now today, also Emmanuel Macron, he confirmed that stop the war and the ceasefire. It's required to end this round of conflict between Gaza and Israel and release the whole captives, and also from both sides, from Israel and Palestine, Hamas must be demilitarized and should be Hamas leave the power from Gaza and take it other bodies to managing Gaza
Yes.
and organizing Gaza.
Yes, Ali, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Your insight is always valued. We now move over to South Asia for our next story, where in Bangladesh, International Crimes Tribunal initiates in absentia proceedings against former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, accusing her of crimes against humanity related to last year's brutal crackdown on student-led protests. In his opening statement, Chief Prosecutor Tajul Islam, appointed by the interim government, describes Hasina as the nucleus of all crimes and calls for the harshest punishment under the law. The case also implicates Hasina's close associates, former Home Minister Duzzaman Khan Kamal and ex-police chief Chowdhury Abdullah al-Mamun as a co-conspirator. Central to the charges are allegations of state-directed killings and torture during the July to August 2024 protests led by the students against discrimination. While Hasina and Kamal are tried in absentia, Mamun is currently in custody and agrees to testify as an approver in the case. Hasina fled Bangladesh on August the 5th of last year amid rising unrests and now resides in India. We're now joined by Prashant Kumar Shil, who's a political commentator. He joins us live from Dhaka in Bangladesh. Thank you very much for joining us, Prashant, on the program. This has been a long process, Prashant. What can you tell us about these recent developments?
Yes, you know that it's depend on the law actually. You know that the law is the Supreme Court and also the appellate divisions and also the lower court. There is a huge process from one if you just make a death sentence. Okay, so it's a long process, and you know that already you know that the Tajul Islam from the chief prosecutor from our interim government, he can already mention from the July and August of his staying from Bangladesh, and he mentioned that there is 1,400 people, mass people killing through from our ex Prime Minister from Sheikh Hasina and Asaduzzaman Khan, and also the former chief of the police. So so all of that Abdullah al-Mamun. So all of that they can mention that they are the victims, but and done the casualties. But in the reality, in sense, you see that from in Bangladesh and process that is in used actually this is my observation that all the cases that is in more than 2,000 3,000 people are the convicted for that. So it's a very tough to scrutiny for that kind of case because it's a take a proper actions and proper investigations and prosecution at all here. So my observation from that is some pressure from the protest from the who are the activists from July and August activists. You know that the last year from this time from out-of-state Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, he came from just fled into India, and also talk about the Masood Jaman Khan. He is also not from here, from Bangladesh. He is from abroad here. So two are the people are not in here. Only one person is here, the former police chief is Abdullah Mamun. But Abdullah Mamun, he can just accept it, mention the quote that and what the happening for that time. He is not from. He can just prove from himself that he is not great acquainted for that. He mentioned that all of the come from all the information, all the order come from the ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's office. So that is in very actually all of the happening. You know that from some several office and several thinking, and also that's the positions you can talk about the how you can just from that kind of legal actions between Sheikh Hasina and others. So this is a process, long process, and also if this is the question for if you maintain the accuracy standard of the Sheikh Hasinas and other victims. So that's the one kind of thing, and victims and also who is an acquainted from this case. So from my observation, from this is a mass killing and from mentioned from our government and the interim government, but it's very tough to prove actually because there's some evidence are happening. But why at that revolution is come and then the convicted
Yes.
are not from here? So all are the very hospitable issues, and we cannot determine yet what is happening and what is the next what the court can decide it from here.
Yes, Prashant Kumar Shil, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you for bringing so much insight to that topic. Now we move to Central America for our next story, where El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele has defended a constitutional reform granting him the right to seek indefinite re-election and condemned critics who said that it represents growing authoritarianism in the Central American nation. This comes after El Salvador's Legislative Assembly pushed through a constitutional reform overnight, eliminating presidential term limits, fueling concerns that it paves the way for President Nayib Bukele to indefinitely stay in power. Opposition Congresswoman Marcela Villatoro declared that democracy in El Salvador has died after the constitutional reform was approved by 57 votes to 3. Villatoro also accused fellow lawmakers of dealing a death blow to the country's democratic system and compared the move to the collapse of democracy in Venezuela. We're now joined by Irina Sukerman, who's a senior journalist. She joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Irina, as always, for joining us here on NewsX World. Irina, Nayib Bukele is a huge figure in global politics since his huge crackdown of gangs in El Salvador. However, El Salvador did have a constitutional limit of a 2-term time in office. However, Nayib Bukele then has now legally extended that. What are the worries surrounding this? What about Nayib Bukele's leadership style can you see possibly turning into something problematic in this regard?
Thank you so much for asking. So the critics are naturally concerned that the elimination of term limits paves the path for authoritarianism and for further consolidation of power outside popular and democratic norms. They are concerned that Bukele's consolidation of power will not end with this measure, and that he will then take measures to eliminate any sort of opposition and so forth. However, the real problem in El Salvador is not Bukele's decision. The real problem, as with any democratic country, is the failure of civil institutions and the failure of civil society. The reality is Bukele does not need to purge anybody for the democracy to be suffering from significant shortages. There is a reason why his party is dominating the parliament and why he had to get rid of the judges from the preceding, who were appointed during preceding administrations. There's also a reason why he is as popular as he is. El Salvador was a mess before he came in. The gangs were essentially destroying the country, and the opposition parties, and Bukele has gone through a number of them before finally settling in his own New Ideas party, have been failing the voters. This is why the support for Bukele has been so overwhelming despite Western criticisms. I think it's easy to criticize when you're living in a prosperous, well-organized democracy, but when you are but El Salvador was virtually on the margins of being a failed state, and Bukele's coming essentially entirely reorganized the country into something that is now functional. Now, does he really need to fear popular dissent in the future? I don't think it will be necessary so long as the opposition continues acting the way it does, essentially focusing on Bukele's person and on the technicalities of the democratic process, rather than reevaluating their own strategy and why no one wants to vote for them. The fact is, Bukele has faced rather undemocratic meddling from the opposition that essentially tried to bring the United States to meddle into internal matters of the country, and that has had links to authoritarian structures around the world, including Venezuela, which is to say that the opposition first needs to become fully respectful of democratic norms and fully respectful of liberal ideas before it can launch this sort of criticism effectively.
Yes, Irina Sukerman, thank you very much for your insight. You are staying with us for further updates. 8 OPEC plus countries have said that they will increase production by 547 barrels a day. The 8 participating countries are Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Algeria and Oman. The alliance has said in a statement that this flexibility will allow the group to continue supporting oil market stability. According to reports, analysts have said that the move aims to regain market share amid resilient crude prices. Reports also suggest that this increase is equivalent to 4 monthly increases, as the unwinding of additional voluntary production adjustments may be suspended or reversed depending on evolving market conditions. We're now once again joined by Irina Sukerman. Irina, why is this such an important issue?
Essentially, this is a reaction to the fact that non-OPEC countries, such as US, Canada, and Brazil, have been successfully entering the market, increasing their own productions, and essentially making money. Defending prices by withholding supply has outlived its strategic usefulness. Because US, Brazil, and Canada are now expanding their output and capturing growing portions of global demand, the cartel is finding itself as a crossroads. They can continue risking further erosion of their influence by withholding supplies, but now they're trying to pivot to a volume-based model because they're seeking to preserve their role in a market increasingly shaped by competition, technological advancement, and shifting geopolitical alliances. It's much easier to control the market when you're the only game in town and you can artificially restrain supply, but that no longer works when you have other actors undercutting your entire strategy. The UAE will account for more than half of the upcoming increase, adding roughly 300,000 BPD and signaling the fact that its own clout is rising within the alliance, and it's looking to leverage new refining and looking to export infrastructure. Saudi Arabia and Russia are continuing to coordinate closely. They have a shared goal of maximizing revenue with the tactical need to preempt potential U.S. political pressure, especially in an election-sensitive energy environment.
Yes, Irina Sukerman, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.